we didn't grow up together, but we both know about working twice as hard. So there's that competitive working hard and being told you have to be resilient. I've got to be strong. I've got to be all of these things. And then I've got to show up at school and I've got to listen to authority. So these intersection of from a cultural perspective. And then
Mm.
when you go to school and you're trying to show up, you don't see anything that looks like you. The curriculum tells you you're not good enough, and everything still feels negative. So when I was diagnosed, I was like thinking, okay, so I'm black. So I've been told I've got to work twice as hard. I've got the tough love from my family who love me dearly, I know, but it was tough love because you have to be resilient. And
Yes.
then then I was thinking, okay, I'm a woman, and I heard about the glass ceiling. I've grown up quite a matriarchal kind of society in terms of my parents, my grandma, my aunties. The women were do a lot of doing, and then I was dyslexic. So which one comes first?
All right. Good day, good people. Welcome to Daily Border Crossings. It is the final day of Black History Month. I'm wearing some Black History stuff here, some earrings, stuff. Excited. I'm excited as we close out. Um, and we'll be finishing the month in a big way. I'm so excited about the guests this evening. You all are in for quite a treat. There's so much knowledge and experience and kindness and wisdom here, and we will get to them in just a few. First, I want to give a few thank yous to those who helped get the word out about this event. I am the host and producer of this Daily Border Crossings podcast. And that's the hat I'll be wearing tonight. But I'm also the director of diversity, equity, inclusion, and community engagement for the Sienna School, which is a school whose tagline is Innovative Dyslexia Education. And I'm proud to work at Sienna because the way the teachers show up for the students and how they specialize in teaching students the way they need to learn, it's just incredible. So thank you to them for helping promote. I also want to thank Leslie Sensei and the good folks over at Capitol Hill Day School, and Erica Thompson, and the folks and families at St. Patrick's Episcopal Day School. I appreciate how they see and value and care for their students, and I want to keep and how they want to keep their teachers and families knowledgeable and aware. So thank you also for promoting. And thanks to you, everyone, for being here. Again, welcome to Daily Border Crossings. Please subscribe. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Take a moment to subscribe and share. And as a reminder, Daily Border Crossings is a show about othering. So we're a show that features guests or topics who have been othered, who don't always feel included. It's like if you feel like you have to cross a border each day you go to a place because you have to leave a lot of who you are outside. Or it's you feel othered because you're just often not included in a lot of mainstream conversations. And today, my guests have definitely experienced what that has felt like. Them, as well as this show topic. The topic of literacy and dyslexia and neurodivergence, specifically in the Black community, is othered. So what if your child or your student or someone you know is not reading the way they should, right? Or is not learning the way that is considered typical? This is something people often don't want to discuss, but guess what? We will be discussing it this evening. Literacy, reading, writing, neurodivergence, and a whole lot more. So let's meet our guests. First up, we have Laderick Horn. He is an author, a poet, an advocate for people who learn differently. Laderick, I'll let you tell us a little bit about yourself and also where you are calling in from.
Yeah, I'm Laderick Horn. Originally from New Jersey. At this very moment, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I have the pleasure of crisscrossing the United States and doing work all over the U.S. and a little bit internationally. My real focus is around improving the outcomes of folks with disabilities more broadly. But I also do a lot of work very focused on folks with dyslexia.
Thank you. All right, next up, Marcia Brissett Bailey. She is a Forbes featured advocate and the author of Black, Brilliant, and Dyslexic. Marcia, will you please tell us a bit about yourself and where you are calling in from?
Hi, Kay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Marcia Brissett Bailey. As Samantha has said, I am calling in from the UK. I'm in London, East London, if anyone knows where that is. And really, I'm really an advocate for dyslexia initially, and then neurodiversity as a whole, of the whole of the spectrum, really, because I just never felt that I belonged. So I just started to talk about my lived experience, and here we are. I'm an educator. I've been in education for the last 30 years. I wanted to go into the IT sector because that's what I did my first degree in, and didn't quite get through the doors. So education welcomed me in, and here I've been. And I think it's been a blessing to be able to have transformed some people's lives and be able to transform my own life and learning along the way. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm sure we're going to have a bit more of a conversation, but yeah, I'm a careers advisor. I've written a book because I didn't see myself in anything to do with neurodiversity. So yeah, I'll stop there. So that's a little bit about me.
All right, thank you so much. And we have Risha Conroy, the founder and director of the Dyslexia Alliance for Black Children, something that she started when she noticed that her son was struggling. Risha, please tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where you are calling in from.
Good evening. So I am calling in from New Rochelle, New York, which is just north of New York City, originally from the Bronx, New York, so just about 15 minutes away from there. And I am the mother of 2 children who are neurodiverse, and we are a neurodiverse family. You know, there's definitely a genetic component, and it runs through our bloodline for sure. And so although what brought me into the work specifically in this area was my son, there was always some things that were happening that I couldn't put a name to, with siblings and with cousins and looking back at aunts and uncles. So there's definitely a intergenerational, multi-generational component to the work that I do.
Thank you so much, Risha. So thank you all for being here. I'll share that literally about an hour ago, a parent called and said, hey, I got the flyer about your event. My daughter was just diagnosed with dyslexia, and I have no idea what to do or where to begin or how to help. I'm a Black parent, and I was so happy to see that you were doing this topic today with the guests that you have, and I'm just glad that you're having this. So I don't think we know how helpful this talk is going to be. So thanks a lot for being on. Marcia, I'm going to start with you because you are, you're up late because you're in the UK. So I'll start with you first, just in case any fatigue hits. No, I know you're going to be here the whole time, but I wanted to start with you because a lot of your work talks about you as a leader around neurodivergence. And I wanted to start there with just that word. Can you tell us what is neurodivergence?
So what I understand neurodiversity to be, or people have neurodiverse, neurodivergent, but if I'm just talking about neurodiversity on a whole, it was my understanding. Judy Singer was, I wouldn't say coined it, but she sort of used that terminology when she was writing her thesis on autism. And that model kind of stuck with a lot of people in terms of celebrating rather than having it as a defect or a negative kind of connotation. The word neurodiversity, about celebrating autism and, all the strengths around autism. I'm just giving you a little picture. And I think what's happened, people like myself as well, when I first heard it when I was doing my master's, I was like, wow, this is a word I want to celebrate. I want to have that celebratory model. And so neurodiversity is stuck with that co-occurring. So you can be dyslexic, ADHD, autistic, and that kind of celebration of, neurodiversity is a spectrum of all different things. And it within that compounds dyslexia, as I said, dyspraxia, dyscalculia. ADHD. So it's kind of like a celebratory model. I'm just doing it in a kind of a nutshell, and we've just kind of clapped onto that kind of that term as a way of celebrating, but also seeing those co-occurrence or overlapping of neurodiversities within, and everyone can see it differently, but that's just giving you a little window from my interpretations, and there's probably more different interpretations of it, but that's just a little window just to give a kind of little insight from my perspective.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Risha, I know you have a lot of data. I saw data in the Forbes article. It's called How Reading Instruction Fails Black and Brown Children. And one of the things it says is that on national tests last year, only 18% of Black fourth graders scored proficient or above in reading. The figures for white fourth graders is 45%. For eighth graders, the percentages were 15 and 42, Black and white. And it goes on to talk about other things. And I'm not saying all this is due to dyslexia or learning difference, but I wonder if you believe, Risha, that a big part of it might be.
So certainly part of it is due to dyslexia. And so, in terms of the prevalence, there's a range that goes from 5 to 20% of the population. That would be across race, ethnicity, language that would have dyslexia. But when we look at the numbers for literacy in general, it speaks to an issue with the way that we provide instruction in the classroom and how we expect or don't expect students to learn. And so in general, we are not providing students with instruction that allows them to build those neurological connections that allow them to be able to decode. And that is what is at the core of dyslexia. But for Black children, when you start to see that disparity between Black children, white children, Asian children who also tend to have higher rates of proficiency in reading, that's the intersection, right? So now we're talking about racism, we're talking about ableism, we're talking about low expectations in general for students. So, in a school where most students are not reading, the first problem is that you have to get students to read. And the second one is that if most students are not reading, how do you ever identify who has dyslexia and who needs a higher dosage of intervention, a different type of instruction? There's no way to do that. And so, those numbers to me speak to two issues, and I don't think there's any way to separate those two isms.
Thank you for that. LaDerek, I wanted to read a quote from you from actually Marcia's book, where you said, the Black dyslexic finds themselves in one of the most complicated states of being the other. And I read that and I thought, of course, Daily Border Crossings is about othering. This is perfect for the show. You write, our skin and all the social vulnerability that it carries forces us to constantly assert our humanity, while our minds, which rarely find appropriate nurturing, can leave us feeling inadequate and invisible. And you go on to talk about some more stuff. The Black dyslexic can draw from the richness of our culture and the ingenuity of our cognition. Our collective narrative is the story of problem solvers who have innovated, entertained, and subverted our way through history. And I read that and I thought, what a beautiful perspective that I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily take when you take this lemons lemonade thing, right? It's like we had to be creative and innovative, and people don't see that. People get really scared, or they just see, well, what's wrong with this person? So I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that, please.
Yeah. So one thing is, I remember writing that.
I was thinking perhaps I remember writing.
I was like, yo, that's good. Whoever wrote that, that sounds on point. Like, yeah.
It's attributed to you.
Yeah, no, it's me. I wrote it. I remember. I wrote it on my iPhone. And that was, part of the reason why I do this work, and I do a lot of professional developments in schools, a lot of keynotes at conferences. I'm co-author of the book, Empowering Students with Hidden Disabilities, A Path to Pride and Success. But part of the reason why I do this work is because as you look throughout human history, it is the folks who are different, right? Who tend to be the ones who make the biggest breakthroughs. And like I have a series on my YouTube channel celebrating Black history and people with disabilities. And around this time of the year, it tends to get shared quite a bit. And it's the Harry Belafontes, right, who show up and are neurodivergent and politically minded and talented and incredibly handsome and charismatic and are able to help fund the civil rights movement, right? There are these figures throughout our history that are exceptional and oftentimes we don't know about them, right? I think one of the great challenges about being neurodivergent and how it sort of sits as a pocket within the larger disability community is that many of us, like, we're hidden, right? Like, I can walk into a space and everybody kind of looks at me and just sees me as someone who is quote unquote normal. It's only when I'm at a desk and asked to spell or read or what have you that the challenges start showing up. And so even when those of us are kind of in spaces where we can really show our excellence, we don't always lead with this idea that, my mind works very differently than everybody else's, or that I struggled in school, or that I still struggle with reading even as an adult. And so, yeah, I think part of the work that we all need to do is be able to kind of lift up and celebrate those people throughout our history, particularly those Black people throughout our history, whose minds, whose bodies work differently than everybody else's. And I think that our children need those examples, right? They need those examples. Right. Because it's not only like I'm a big supporter of structured reading and interventions and inclusive education. And I also think we need to see folks who look like us, right? Like, we need to have these examples that we can look to. So yeah, I think that was kind of like what I was channeling.
Okay, thanks. Marcia.
Yeah, can I just add to that in a way, if that's okay, Laderick? I just think there's some complexities and there's layers to that complexity, which I take from Laderick's quote. So when I think about the intersections and the intersectionality of it, I think of my childhood and being told I had to work twice as hard. So if we just hold on to that thought, Derek and I've had that conversation before, and we didn't grow up together, but we both know about working twice as hard. So there's that complexity, working hard and being told you have to be resilient. I've got to be strong. I've got to be all of these things, and then I've got to show up at school and I've got to listen to authority. So these intersections from a cultural perspective, and then when you go to school and you're trying to show up, you don't see anything that looks like you. The curriculum tells you you're not good enough, and everything still feels negative. So when I was diagnosed, I was like thinking, okay, so I'm Black, so I've been told I've got to work twice as hard. I've got the tough love from my family who love me dearly, I know, but it was tough love because you have to be resilient. And then then I was thinking, okay, I'm a woman, and I heard about the glass ceiling. I've grown up quite a matriarchal kind of society in terms of my parents, my grandma, my aunties, the women were do a lot of doing. And then I was dyslexic. So which one comes first? How do I show up? So for me, when I think about Laderick's poem or quote, I think about all those intersections of how I have to show up, how I have to believe that school. And then when I go home, I've got to be this super, got to tidy up. I've got to do all of these things. Dyslexia don't come into the mix. It's like, that's not even a thing. You're talking about dyslexia. My family didn't even know about dyslexia, because what they were saying is like, just, you got to get on master, you got to be resilient. So I see, just in a nutshell, is those complexities, those intersections, and then not being believed at school and not being seen, that unconscious bias, all of those other elements, what then you then start to find that you don't feel like you're good enough. You don't feel like you're worthy.
Right.
And so those are the intersections, and then the intersection of trauma, all of those other things, what comes along with it. So it can be so complex, and there's layers that you then have to unlearn as well, and unlearn to be that you can be vulnerable.
Right.
And and be able to ask for help, but then you're told you're not meant to ask for help because you mustn't trust. It's a whole complex thing. So I'll leave it there, but that's what I read through it, and how you then have to build yourself to then believe that you are somebody, and it's So that's what I got from it. And I just think it was very powerful because it's spot on to my lived experience. And then having to show up and how do I become myself?
Right.
In all of that.
Well, I think what you're both saying, that speaks to my role at the school. That's it. I work at a school for students who have dyslexia and other language-based learning challenges. And I'm the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so that's one of the things I try to get people to see and understand. Like, you are teaching students who have dyslexia or dysgraphia or dyscalculia. And it is important to teach in these different ways, but there's also all these extra layers if you are a student there who is also Black, who is also, whatever your gender might be, who is also from this background. All of that shows up first. It's like all that stuff you can see before the stuff that you can't. And that's one of the things I try to lift up and get teachers to think about when you are also teaching students who have all of these intersections. So thank you for lifting that. It just got me excited to think about that. And y'all got a little ahead of me because I am coming back to like this lived experiences, which is fine. But I want to come back to it. But first, Marcia, on the subject of like the data and stuff, the Forbes thing was talking about the US, but can you share a little of like, what is it like in the UK? Because I think that I don't speak for everybody in the United States, but I think there's a lot of people in this country that think that a lot of what's happening with reading with Black children in this country is a United States thing. But would you say that you see lower rates, or what are you seeing in the UK?
I mean, I haven't got any data to hand right now, but what I can say, I'm working with a school. I won't say the school just in case anybody's listening from the UK. And the school wants me to come in and talk and work with them, because what they're finding, it's a girls' school, what they're finding, those young people, girls who are neurodiverse, that happen to be Black or Asian or of mixed heritage, I don't know how you frame it in the UK, but could be mixed with, a heritage of Black or Caribbean or white, they are failing in the school system. So this is just one school I'm just taking because I haven't got the data with me, but that's just one school who's saying, what can we do? Because we're doing all of the same things. And also, how can we support teachers to identify very early on that there could be some learning differences?
Okay.
And for some of those young people, there is, but we're only learning when they're right at year 11. So towards the end of their, what we call secondary school, I don't know if it's high school, but it's before they will go on to, they will be 16. So before they go on to the next transition to school, to college, we're finding that we're only finding out at this stage, if you're lucky. And so how can we work with teachers? So that's just one example. So to sort of follow on from, I'm not saying it's the whole scale, but we do know there are stats that they're saying that our young people, and particularly young people from Black and Asian groups, are being failed. And I've worked in the local authority, and I was seeing young people being excluded. We're not talking about exclusion, but that fits into the kind of equation of how some of our children, especially Black boys, are being excluded. Again, I don't have the data, but I know for sure because of the work that I've done working in the local authority, seeing young boys as young as 5 being excluded, and it predominantly seemed a very clear minority or global majority of children being excluded. And then we can fit in class as well. So class does come into that. So we'll have white boys who are more working class in that category, but there was a very strong Black and brown minority or excluded. I mean, sometimes permanently excluded, which takes you down a pipeline of other things. And so we know within the UK, 50% roughly are within our prison systems who are dyslexic or neurodiverse. So we know those figures are for sure. But again, there's something going on. There is something going on. We know. Yeah. So
I heard you talk about the diaspora, right? Not just here, but there. If you're part of the African diaspora, there's something going on.
Yeah, there's definitely something going on. So there is data there. And this is what we were saying earlier on before the that who is doing the research? And we need people who look like us doing that research, who have an interest in language and the lived experience, because we're not always seeing it from a particular lens. We're seeing it more from a Eurocentric lens. So what does that look like if we're not doing that work? And why are we not being able to do that work? So there's work around the work that needs to be looked at as well, and how we get to do that work, because there's people who want to do the work and want to do the research. So we've got research to even, do our studies and academically to be able to write about these things. And that's a subject in itself.
Yeah, right.
And I just wanted to say one thing before you hop to the next question, because I think, we're talking about it kind of a little bit in code when we say there's something going on when we look across the globe and we talk about the diaspora. It's all coming from the same rotten tree, right? We are talking about a diabolical system of isms at the root of it, racism at the very root of it, anti-Black racism. And so we have to call that out every single time. What we're seeing when we look at our Black children being underserved in schools is anti-Black racism. And that touches every corner of the world that has been influenced by Western society.
Yeah. Thank you for
100%.
adding that. Lydia, I'm going to hop back to you when I was thinking about, I'd like to hear about your journeys, right? I think, part of it, I watched a video where you talked about this childhood experience, you talked about riding a different bus, and I was watching that, and it like broke my heart. I didn't see that coming. I didn't know what you were about to say, but I was like, it just like it hit me hard. I was like, oh my gosh. And I thought, Marcia, you were saying a little bit ago about like the working twice as hard. So there's layers and pieces of this that there. Oh, thank you for meeting people. There's layers and pieces of this that like we all feel as a Black person, right? Like I felt like, oh, yep, I have my mom, grandma, everybody's like work twice as hard. And then there's pieces that because I don't have dyslexia that I don't feel or that I don't know. But I think when I was hearing you tell the story about riding a different bus, and I thought about kids on this quote unquote typical bus, right? Regular bus, whatever. I think I thought as a child, I went back and like allowed myself to go back, and I thought that the kids that I saw, the other kids that I saw, on the different bus, like I always, I guess, thought that they didn't mind. They didn't really pay attention to the as crazy as that might sound.
No, we was paying attention. No, we paid attention.
Like they don't know. They ain't noticing that like that difference was something that we noticed, but yeah, man, your story is hurt. That hurt me. And I was wondering, I wanted you to share about that, but also share, and maybe this is a big part of it, as this will be a part of the sharing. I feel like a lot of times when we learn something about dyslexia, it comes from people telling us about things they know, signs they saw in their students, signs parents saw in their kids. But so I'm asking you to share that story if you feel like it. But also, I want to know like how you discovered, like what was that like, realizing that I think I'm learning differently, or I think I'm seeing the world differently, or something seems different. Like what was that like, the journey of discovering that?
Okay, yeah, so there's a lot there. All right. So so the journey of discovering it. My mother was my chief advocate, and she's the one who like I wrestled with to do vocabulary lists and everything else. And my parents, they sent me to a private Catholic school in New Brunswick, New Jersey to start out my education. And by the time I got to the first grade, the second time, it was clear that I couldn't do the same work as everyone else. And I think, and that's like some of the first memories that stand out was that, there were these vocabulary lists and this expectation that was going to be a spelling test at the end of every week. And I knew I was going to fail. I was going to experience failure. So.
Okay, wait, can I pause there?
Yeah.
Pause, like, what is that? Like, how do you, is it like, I can't recall what those were. Like, what is that for some parent that's like, or teacher, or me? Let me just ask for me. What is it that and I'm asking as somebody who was like, memorize those things and ace those tests, because that's what I could do. Meanwhile, I couldn't keep up with anything. I lost everything. Like I was not organized. I can't keep up with like the stuff in my backpack. I hope it'll make it home. But the reading and all that I could do. So how do you know? Like you look at this and you're like, I know I'm going to pass. I'm not going to pass this test because what? Can you explain what that's
like? Yeah, I mean, it's it manifests in behavior like like I can remember on a snowy day having the spelling list and not wanting to fight with my mother, and so just sticking it in a bank of snow and just, it's gone. Um, you know, yeah, I remember getting to middle school and being in special ed, and having a teacher that was sort of whose job it was to teach us sort of in a conventional way how to spell and how to read. And I just remember hating to go into that classroom, hating everything about it. And then I would do things, right? Like behavior is communication. So like when I would ride that short bus, um, my first experience of riding it, I just refused to talk when I was on the bus, right? And what's interesting is that was behavior that I got reported, right? Like the bus driver would say, like, why can't you all be like him? Not realizing that this was my way of saying, like,
I'm rebelling.
Even as a child, I realized like I couldn't necessarily point at where the problem was. I think I really thought a lot of it was about me, but I understood on some level there are aspects of a system that I'm in, and I don't have to participate in it, right? And so, yeah, that teacher, who didn't have the tools to really educate us, I would just refuse to participate in her class. I would just put my head down in the back of the room. And that's the way it showed up for me. It showed up with me drawing and, using like art as therapy. And I could see it in my other friends who would throw chairs, right? Or would fight each other, or were class clowns, or things along those lines. So, but for the reading piece, it was just like, I can't do it. Every time I would try, I'd get a few syllables in, this, that, and the other. And I could never produce anything that was fluid. And so, yeah, that persisted up until my adulthood. And even with reading, thank God for audiobooks, because that really opened up reading to me. Now, I'd always loved language. I think I was born a poet, but the mechanics of it, like technology is what really unlocked that for me. And even like as you were reading that passage, I mean, my reaction was a genuine one, right? It was like, I know how good I am with words when I'm given the time, when I can sit down and I've got the technology and nobody's bothering me, right? And it's like, and I remember going to county college out of high school, and my IEP team recommended me going there and being a part of a disability support program. And I'm trying not to cry, but I remember having this great Professor Marshall, and took him for like college level writing, and he, it's writing this 5-paragraph essay, and I had learned how to do that in a remedial writing class, and so like he would give us assignments, and he would walk into the class, and he would just sit at the desk and just start reading paragraphs of like the folks who had submitted stuff before, and it was like the good paragraphs. And it was a way for me to hear what good writing was supposed to sound like. And every time he read one of my paragraphs, I was like, oh, here it comes, and like for years I knew I knew what good writing sounded like if I could hear Marshall's voice saying, I don't know how neurotypicals like spell and write and make all that happen. But one of my theories is as you look through literature, you see a lot of dyslexics who are poets, the Yeatses and folks like that. You listen to enough MCs, you will hear people talk about their experience of being in special ed and struggling with writing. And I think it is in the struggle where we get stronger. It is with the resistance we build a muscle. And so, yeah, I mean, that's how it sort of showed up in my life early on. And yeah, it's something I mean, it doesn't go away, right? Like if given the choice, I would rather listen to something as opposed to try to decode it with my eyes.
That what you just said about MCs, as like a diehard lover of hip hop, older school hip hop, but some new stuff. I like J. Cole. Anyway, makes me think about the connection between writing like how writing is taught or how writing is viewed, you know? Because like you think you got to write down all this stuff, but if you just rap it, say it, you're still getting your words out.
Yeah.
It's making me think about
And
something different with the way that's taught.
I was going to say that I see words visually as well. And so I see it in pictures. So I don't necessarily see. So if you gave me a sort of a plant, I'm not going to spell I'm going to see the plant and then I'm going to maybe to make a story from the plant. So I visualize, the visualization comes first. So I can visualize words without seeing it. So I learned visually. I don't know if you want me to follow on from Derek about a little bit of my journey. Would that be helpful?
I did want to know. I did want to know how yes, yours too, what you noticed about yourself. I know I read it was a part in your book where you talked about also bumping into things and breaking glass, being accident prone.
My grandma just knew not to let me in the kitchen. So I didn't really learn to cook. I had to learn by observation. So, I'm come from a Caribbean family, so ackee and saltfish and, yam and all those things. I learned visually because I was always breaking something in that kitchen. So my grandma used to say, just sit down and go to the side and, just sit there. And so that's how I had to learn observing. So I don't know if that was, anything else or just me as my dyslexia. I don't know, because obviously some people will think that terminology, which we don't use, that clumsiness, could be linked to dyspraxic, but I wouldn't say, I don't know about being dyspraxic, but I definitely very early on. I'm going to do a really quick stop because I'm aware of the time, but I remember loving to play and imagination was my best friend. And then when we got to year 4, I don't know if that's the same as grade 4, but year 4, year 5, so I'm sort of going into 9 years of age, I realized it was getting a bit serious. And I love school. You remember, for me, I always bring the cultural perspective. My parents, my grandma, especially because I grew up with my grandmother and my grandparents, you got to listen to authority, you got to be respectful, you got to be all these things. So I was very obedient. I wanted to, be, conform. And, I loved to do that. I don't know what that was, but as I said, I came from a very traditional Caribbean family. So that was very part of the intersections within my upbringing with other things. But anyway, so that was like, okay, I love school, but school doesn't love me because I'm going to get my work marked and I'm getting red marks and my friends are not. So there was already this earlier thing of making comparisons. And I know that there's no such thing as being perfect, but that's not what I was reading. I was reading that they're not getting red marks, I'm getting red marks, and I'm not being told what's the problem. They're just saying you've got to correct them. So very early on, I was starting to realize I was feeling different and I didn't know what I could do about it, because I'm doing everything I can. I'm showing up for school. I'm loving school. I want the teachers to be happy with what I'm doing. So that was just one aspect. So I did a lot of imagination. So I was a lot of like visualizing, I was able to shut myself off the class because I wasn't processing what was going. It was just going too quick. One of the biggest things for me, and I think I know now what that is, was trauma, but was reading aloud. Lots of young people or people in schools talk about reading aloud. I thought phonics was like, like cats. We used to go cat. So what I thought I was doing by doing those sounds or trying to sound out things was how you read, and it will just magically appear. But the more I was doing these sounds and it would sound like I was stuttering, the worse it was getting. And so I couldn't read, and phonics didn't work for me. Can you imagine? Phonics is the thing that we use because if you do phonics, it's going to make you a really proficient reader, but phonics wasn't working for me. So what happened is I started to get those palpitations, sweaty hands, and feeling just, I was traumatized. And what happened to me, just to give you this context very quickly, is that I decided, which really resonated with Derek, I stopped speaking. I thought, I'm going to be invisible. I thought I was so clever. I'm going to be invisible. And so I'm only going to speak if I'm spoken to, but if I don't say anything, then no one's going to notice me. Can you imagine? This is my clever idea. But I soon realized that wasn't working. And also I would respond because you got to respond to your adults. So my mum, and this is really quick, sort of went to school because you compare with your cousins, and I wasn't reading, I couldn't read a book. So by 10, I was still not reading. So my mum went down. I just feel it was like the drums. She's going down there with her drums to say why her Marcy's not reading. And they actually sent me to psychotherapy and to have another short kind of break because we haven't got time. But that psychotherapy, I was playing with dolls' houses. They were talking to me, asking me things about my family. And I did a podcast with my mum. Sadly, my mum died last year, but I did a podcast with her, and she told me that they thought something was going on at home. And I'm going to know this, even if we're not in the same place. This is happening to a lot of Black children, and I was one of those children. They thought something sinister was happening home. I had no idea, but what I was told, you don't talk your business. So whatever was going on or what they were trying to find, I wasn't saying nothing about anything, even if it was waking up in the morning. So psychotherapy, I had that until I was about 12 or 13. And then they stopped. But just to quickly speed on, secondary school, which would have been from when I was 16, no, not 16, from 12 to 16, it was like it was a blur. I remember being in maths class and I just was in the corner and I was doing Rubik's Cube, Rubik's Cube, so doing the shapes to finding different ways to do the shapes. Yeah, that's what I did for most of 2 years. Predominantly, they got away with failing me doing that. And then it was only when I retook my qualifications at college, which is when you're 16 to 19, was my government politics teacher, because I had to retake all my subjects. I only passed one subject, it was drama. He said to me, Marcia, you're so articulate, but how you're speaking, you'll get an A every time, but when you're going to write, it wasn't translating. And I don't get it. So that teacher, it's an Italian teacher, I can't remember his name now, but I would say, saved me, because I kept on pushing, because the teachers told me at primary school, which is that when I was like 10, before I left, that I'm never going to academically achieve. Do you see? So you got the psychotherapy, I'm never going to academically achieve, but it's only when I got to 16 and somebody saw something in me. And that's when I got diagnosed with dyslexia at 16. And they, and that was that decision when I said, okay, I'm Black, I'm a woman, and now I'm dyslexic. How am I going to choose? So that's just to give you a nutshell. But I realize now that trauma really had set on me. And that's where you had the imposter, the sabotaging, the low confidence, self-esteem, all of those just was upon me. And I was carrying all of that. And I'm having to be a strong Black woman, and I have to be resilient. I don't have to be, but I had to be resilient, because that's the only way I was going to survive. Yeah. So that's just to give you a little bit of a snippet. I try to be really quick, but there's a lot in there.
There was a lot in there, and there's a lot of great stuff in there. And you said like that person saved me. And I feel like that's the stories you hear a lot. Like there's this one person that will see something that nobody else seems to see. And that opens up all these things, because you're like, wait, I'm not whatever everybody else seems to think I am. Thank you for sharing those. I was asking for those because I was gonna ask, for you all to share what parents should look for, but I also thought it was a different way to just like let you share what you experienced as a child, and people who are on this call listening, who are parents or who are teachers or whoever, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever, could hear you, could hear and think about, am I seeing some of this? So I do want to switch to something like that. Like how I guess when I think about what you would want parents to know, so maybe some common misperceptions maybe that lead to this whole stigma that it would help if there was no stigma, so people could maybe get help sooner or get some interventions or something sooner. But what do y'all think parents need to know, or teachers, like what maybe not necessarily look for, but no, I don't know, whoever wants to kind of jump in on that one. Risha, anyway.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, go. I'll come afterwards.
Yeah, I'll start, because my story is a little bit different, because I don't have dyslexia. My son has dyslexia. My daughter is also neurodiverse. So she has dysgraphia, ADHD. They both have ADHD, and these things come in bundles. But as a parent, the thing that allowed me to see that something might happen or might be happening for him once he got to kindergarten is that he did have a speech and language delay. So we saw those signs, and he had some intervention in preschool, and it was really, he was very communicative, right? So he didn't have to use words for me to know what he needed. I could, respond to him just from a look or just from a laugh or just from whatever it was. And he's also incredibly bright. So he was able to like read the room and predict what a response might be, right? So imagine like a 3 or 4-year-old having to do all of that to be able to like fit in. And I remember in terms of like his language, I put him in a karate class, and he was 4 years old at the time. And he was the only Black boy in his class. And I'm observing from the back of the room. And so there's a lot of directions going on in the class. And he was so lost. And he's, such a wonderful, like bright, happy child. And he's a teenager now. He still has that energy. And I saw him kind of turn around and start making faces and start acting like the class clown. And I was like, oh, absolutely not. Like, I see what's happening here. If he continues to be in environments where they don't address his needs, he's going to turn into that child. And then they're going to see him. And then they're going to address that. And he's going to be penalized for it, labeled with things that keep him from getting access to what is really the root cause, right? So for him, language and writing. And so once he got to kindergarten, and now he had the academic demands, it started to show up again. So he wasn't, retaining like he couldn't name letters. When he was in preschool, he really couldn't even remember the names of shapes. But when he had to connect the sounds to the symbols, it just wasn't coming together. And it could vary from one page to the next. And he just continued to struggle. And his teacher actually did come to me and say something, but it wasn't because of his reading. It was because he also has word finding issues. So like finding the right word. So that was showing up in class when he was speaking. And she's like, well, does he stutter? And I'm like, you know what? Actually, he doesn't stutter, but he does have word finding issues. And that is part of dyslexia, because I started to do my research. So let's get him a diagnosis, or let's get him an evaluation. And then my request for an evaluation, just that simple thing, changed my relationship with the school, because the way that he spoke in class, which might have been irritating her a little bit, so she brought it to my attention, was okay. But now I was saying, well, there are other things going on and you need to address them. It turned into a battle, and I had to fight for him and reach the point where I actually ended up removing him from the school, because he also was no longer safe there. And so there's, a lot of other things that come into play where, especially with language. So he was being targeted, and teachers were using his, issues with language against him. So they would tell him, well, that didn't happen. That's not what they said. That's not what they meant. And he'd come home and tell me stories in other people's words. And so ended up removing him from the school. But, look for those signs, but then also look for signs, those behavioral, like those secondary things that come up as a parent. So things like, a child that was really social all of a sudden doesn't want to participate in certain things like recess. Like, why don't you want to go outside at recess? Maybe the kids are making fun of them because of something that happened in the classroom. And like those secondary behaviors, a lot of times will tell you that there's something else that is getting in the way. And so I saw those things as well. And it was a battle, and the battle, it continues. He's 14 years old now. He's in a different school environment, a school environment that doesn't know as much about dyslexia. So now we're getting into that, reading aloud in theater class. And what's he going to do? Send things home in advance so that we can look at them. But there's a lot of education that I have to continue to do with the school. Now that he's 14, I'm also working a lot with him on like self-advocating, right? So rehearsing and practicing, like, this is what we need to say. This is what you need to say, right? And I do that, I'll be really honest, I do that with him in school, but he's 14. He's about this high, taller than me. I worry about him interacting with the police or interacting with anyone who doesn't see him as human. And so, maybe he trips up on a word, or maybe he's asked to sign something and he doesn't get it. So we rehearse those things too, because I have to prepare him for whatever environment he's going into, even to the point where I don't understand, I need you to call a parent.
It's Derek is helping when I look at your face, because like you'll be smiling, I think, because something resonates at the exact time I'm getting angry and frustrated. And then I look at you and I'm like, oh, I can calm down again, because he's like, yep, I know that, and yeah, I made it through it, or whatever you're thinking. But I'm getting frustrated, partly because like all this continues, like y'all lived through it, and then it took like one person. Like, why are there so many people missing so many signs? I think it's just a testament to just what is norm. What's normal is normal, and that's how so many people learn. And we grow up and we think that there's only one right way. Maybe I'm not. I mean, I don't have an answer for where I'm going, but I wish there was a some solution or something different. I'm going to read something that somebody sent me in the chat real quick. I love this example of unapologetic advocacy for students of color. So important, especially in predominantly white spaces. But yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say, Laderick? Sorry.
Yeah, my reaction is, Risha's, the story of her son is so in line with, mine and many other people who are dyslexic. And then she's giving you just all the, all the right advice, and so I'm on mute, but I'm saying, and, like, amen to that. Some of the things that I would add is, I think it's really important that families have a sense of the law. That here in the U.S., it's the Individual with Disability Education Act, IDEA, and that right. dictates your IEP meetings and what sort of accommodations or modifications or supports that your child is allowed to have. And then when they get into the adult world, it's the ADA, because whether it be higher education, independent living, going into employment, a lot of the challenges that we experience, we're still going to experience in adult lives. So we should have at least a basic foundation of what our rights are and how to communicate what those rights are in a variety of settings. And I just created, if you go to my website, laderick.com, I just created a video course. And there's a section on there around self-advocacy. And part of what we do, I have in there is a script, the skeleton of a script. Because, there are times like I can see my processing delays happening, right? Where like you ask me a question, I'm going to look up and I'm going to pause and I'm going to think through my questions and everything else. And so having that script when it comes time to talk to an employer or a professor or a teacher or a friend, the way I kind of phrase it is it gives our young people tool, it gives them armor, right? So they can have the language to be able to communicate with people who they are and what kind of supports they need. I think it also helps them to deal with some of that bullying, right? When they've got that, when they've got that language. And then I'm also going to just say that the idea, like, I wish we had more answers or more solutions. Like, we got all the answers. The solutions are already out there, right? It's like, to some extent, we have to be comfortable doing things that may feel a bit radical. And so some of that is around how we educate our teachers. We do a poor job in our teacher prep programs. There's still these delineations, special ed over here and everybody else over there, right? Like, as if these lines around who is neurodivergent. I mean, like, we gonna all be in the same classes together. We're all in the same communities together. And as a teacher, I would want to have the tools to be able to educate everyone. And so, there are some schools that I've visited and worked with where they only accept teachers who have dual certifications, because then what that is saying is that I've learned how to educate and to work with a wide variety of students. We need to look at how we structure our classrooms schedules, our school schedules. Do they allow time for kids to be able to take their tests outside of the classroom in relatively distraction-free environments? Or are we reinforcing situations where they're being pulled out unnecessarily And then there's the question around the larger culture that dominates our school. And yes, it is informed by ableist or white supremacist ideas and culture. But there should be a culture around inclusion that dominates our schools, right? Like we should, like even our kids, all of us should know what dyslexia is, understand that not all of our minds work the same way. And that for the variety of ways that human beings show up in this world, that it's okay. So yeah, that's just some of the things that come to me.
Can I just add to that? 'Cause I'm aware of the time.
That's great. Thanks, Laderick. Thank you for that. Also, Marcia, just a second. Laderick, so let me just say we are coming up on 7 o'clock. So if anybody needs to leave, feel free to do so.
I'm gonna hang in there. I know I had to jump out at 7, but I'm having such a good time, so I'm gonna hang in there a little longer.
Okay, all right. I was gonna say we're gonna hang for a bit. I know Marcia said she could, and Risha, did you? No pressure. No pressure now that we're like on.
I'm good.
Okay.
More, yeah.
All right. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just to round up on that, I wanted to say 100% with the law. Having worked as within the local authority, I had to, as part of my role, advocate and empower parents and young people around the law. We have the Equality Act 2010, which is it covers everything in terms of equality, whether it's women, age, it covers everything, and it covers disability, which dyslexia comes under. Then we have the Code of Practice, which is it's a guidance. It's a guidance really, but we adhere to that in some way. But we have a statutory duty within our schools called the Children and Family Act. So with all of those things, I've been able to help parents and navigate. But the key thing, what Derek said and what Risha's saying, is about how we advocate and how we inform and enable parents as well as young people to be able to know elements of the law, to be able to advocate for themselves, to know what the duties are within our school education system and what they should be following in terms of the Equality Act, but also within the Children and Family Act. So the law is really vital. And I think from a cultural perspective, I think some people have traumas, and parents I'm talking about who may be neurodiverse or have hidden disability themselves, to feel fearful to actually even start to speak up. So there's that generation of parents who really find that difficult or not confident. So I've worked with a lot of parents, and then there's some parents who don't want anything because they feel that they don't trust the system. So we've got those kind of parents. How do we support those parents where their children are struggling? What I didn't say earlier, that my daughter's neurodiverse as well. So I detected very early on, from when she was in year 3, which is about year 8 or 9, that she definitely had something happening with her reading. If we're reading the same word and she wasn't recognizing it, it was definitely that she was memorizing rather than using it phonologically, like in phonic sets. So my daughter's neurodiverse, and my nephew's autistic. So like Risha, I'm a very neurodiverse family. My mum was also dyslexic as well and got diagnosed in her 30s after doing a course. And I said, Mum, I think you're dyslexic. So these things, you have to always advocate, but it gets tiring. You're having to always fight. But if we have the right tools and the support system of feeling you can ask, I know that I had to learn that skill of learning to ask, because I was taught that you don't ask people nothing, you don't tell people your business. I'm going back to that because these can be fundamental from a cultural perspective, and how we have to unlearn some of these kind of thought processes, because we're not going to get the support. And if we don't ask a friend or somebody we feel we can confide and trust, then we're going to be being isolated and feeling alone, and things may go into all sorts of things. Not that I'm saying mental health, but things can happen if we don't have those avocations. So for me, I'm having to always be an advocate, and I'm really I guess really to empower others. I really it's part of my passions to empower others to really find their voice, and why we're here today. So I'm just touching on the little bits of those things, but I had to advocate for my daughter. It took me 2 years to get it. We have to have a full diagnosis. You have an educational psychologist report, and it took me 2 years to get that through the local authority for my daughter. And I was aware that she was dyslexic, so I diagnosed her without being formally diagnosed. So yeah, I just wanted to add that in, how important is the avocation and also knowing aspects of the law. But sometimes we have to tool our parents. And again, this is really interesting. It's about the design of our infrastructure, because you're saying that, Derek, about we have teacher training. Sometimes you have one day Some teachers say they had 2-day training around SEND and neurodiversity. That is not enough. We're not serious. We need to invest more into that. So we have inclusive practice within our school, multisensory, different ways of learning. The system is, I always say, if you was to base it on my exam results at school, it wouldn't be correct. If you're testing me on my standardized testing, on my memory, how is that showing up to be your best? We have to have a more of a strength-based approach. I've seen children who are meant to be really good at doing the memory, but if you get them in a group work, they're not. And we've got to think, what's the skills for the future? But I'll leave it there.
Well, you mentioned something that I think comes up for me in my line of work when a parent reaches out to me, or when I was in the classroom when I had to talk to parents. I would come across a lot of a number of Black families who were concerned about moving forward, if we thought there may be something going on, like a learning challenge, like dyslexia. And they were so, this would be the stigma, I guess, is a way to refer to it, but they'd be so concerned, they'd say, well, I don't want a label. I don't want, something to follow them. There's distrust. And what would you say to parents who don't want to address it because they're concerned about a label?
So if I can start. So I'll start off by saying that I get it.
Absolutely.
Right. Right. Like
there's
that doesn't come from nowhere, right? There's a reason why, you're afraid of the label.
Trust.
And like that's not made up, that's real. And so even when you go into advocacy and navigating this space, you have to understand how to, deal with that historical and current reality. And so like in my journey with my son, when we started a little bit early, so he was, preschool age, actually around 2-3. So he, had just missed early intervention. But we weren't necessarily on the same page in my home about what was going to happen, right?
Okay.
Because dad was like, wait a second, what? You can give him, he's this age, a label already. And then when some of the testing came back and some of the language that was used for him, then I was like, I don't like the way this sounds. Like, what does this mean for him? And I had a lot of fear around what that would mean for him once he got to school. Like, are the expectations still going to be there for him? Are they still going to be high for him? I already know they're not going to be super high because he's a Black boy, but now what does this mean? Is this going to be an excuse for him to fail? And it was once he got to school. So you have to like come in with a different set of tools and understand the law in order to continue to hold the school and administrators accountable for what they are supposed to do for your child. And that takes an incredible amount of like strength and support to be able to do that. Not every family is in the same position. I can even say across the years from like 2 to 14, I wasn't always in a year where I was able to show up with that kind of fight that you need. And so that's why the support is really important. So I would, with the work that we do, Dyslexia Alliance for Black Children, we give families information and we hope to be able to support them or connect them to support, because this journey alone is just backbreaking. It's really very difficult, and it's very difficult by design.
Okay. So, I was going to say, don't you think it's by design that things are difficult?
By design.
It's by design.
Yeah. You were gonna, go ahead.
I don't know where I was gonna go with that, but I think the other piece of it is, well, I think there are a few things. So one, for school staff who are hearing that, in part, that could be an evaluation of the quality of the services in your district, right? Like in some instances, right? Like if there's a reluctancy to really get your child connected to disability supports or what have you. I mean, there's like a grapevine that some parents are connected to, or you need to do a better job of just advertising how good the quality of those supports are. The other thing is, when we've been hearing it throughout this conversation, is the genetic component. And so, like your average person like lives in the same town or the same area they grew up in, right? And so if my kid's dyslexic, maybe I was dyslexic. And now I'm facing the reality of sending them back into the same schools and experiencing the same trails of trauma that I went through when I was a kid. And so that reluctancy, I think, is understandable. And we are also the people who sit at the intersection of abuse from the medical system, right? Historically, we sit in the intersection of abuse from the education system, both from segregation and, like, let's keep it real, like a lot of our young people, their first encounters in policing will come through disciplinary actions in the school, right? And so there's a reason why we need to be, like, why we show up with all this concern. And I think it is the job of our educators to one, like, really convey, like, okay, maybe school was like that for you now, but this is what the experience is gonna be like for your child. And I really think, like, organizations like the Alliance, connecting families to parents who's maybe started in a very similar space and their kids are getting the supports where they can be some of the ones to talk with them, as opposed to it coming from the school staff solely. So yeah, I think, like, I completely understand those feelings and those attitudes. I think it's a natural response. And then, like, school leaders just need to be really creative and really listen to how it is they respond to those concerns.
I think that's a good point. The last, all of it, but the last part about leaders being creative, because as you were talking, I was thinking about what they could say to kind of, I don't know if convince is the right word, but to get them to see that, like, there's something going on. But that it probably requires a lot of trust building up front, so that, like, I know that what you're telling me about my child is something that I should believe, because I believe that you actually genuinely care about them. But I like how you framed it to get creative about it, because I can see it as just a brush off, or like, well, I try to tell a family, they don't want to listen, and that's it, as opposed to listening to why. I don't think everybody is aware. Maybe they are aware, but don't pay attention to, like, all these historical reasons of, putting Black kids in special ed, regardless of, like, there's no test, but just, like, throwing us in there during segregation and things, all these factors. I want to read, there's somebody put something in the chat, Tiffany Arrington. During my school psychology training, I was profoundly impacted by the knowledge of two things: the significant and systemic cultural bias embedded in IQ testing, and the intentional mediocrity of the American special education system. Several major school districts here in the middle of the US continue to utilize the cognitive achievement discrepancy as the front door for special education services. As a consequence, area districts have more non-white students in special ed under the category of emotional disability rather than SLD as the only way to qualify a student for services. What can we do? What can we do?
I just want to say, obviously I'm on the other side of in the UK, but everything you're saying, and I just, it's not even words, it's a feeling that just makes me feel so, I don't even know what I feel, but there's definitely an emotion there, that everything you're saying, especially the emotional, we have that term, social and emotional mental health. It's actually a terminology that we give to children to say that they're not, they're socially, emotionally not really able, and there's a mental health aspect, but it's just mirroring everything. So this tells me there's a design of a structure that it's broken, and why are we putting plaster on it, or a band-aid on it? What is that? It just really intrigues me. We're not, we're speaking like it's 30 years ago or so, when I was, going through the education system. Well, it's longer, but it's how is that? So something is not adding up here, and what we want to do is go to a universal design, inclusive practice. Why are we not doing that? So something about, I remember doing sociology, there's something about this triangle where not all of us can get through to achieve. There's a privilege element here as well. You talk about districts, we will talk about like councils, or and so some people are more privileged, or if you have money to be able to pay, but it's all it's just it's a lot. So I'm feeling a lot of emotions because it's the same or similar across the globe. So what,
Yeah, there's a in the US we got the zip code lottery, right? And like depending on where you were born and where you end up, special ed might be amazing, right? Like you may luck out and be with some folks who are very progressive, or they've put in inclusive practices, and your child can move through the school and get the supports that they need. But that's not always the case. And again, like I think a lot of it goes back to school leaders being brave enough to really examine what their practices are, really looking at the data around who is achieving and who isn't, also listening to student voices. And you don't just listen to your honor roll kids and the kids who are in gifted and talented classes, but really doing the work of talking to the kids who are disenfranchised, who are failing out, and say what's not working here for you, both for them and their families. And the phrasing of the mediocrity of special education, like I can point to just in my own life amazing special educators, and then professionally over the years I've encountered many who are just remarkable, who bridge that gap, who are that one significant person that opens up literacy for their students or what have you. But we also live in, there are schools where being in special ed is being in special ed. It is a room at the end of the hall. It is a room in a basement. It is a room in a portable trailer. It is being sent outside of your standard school, outside of your district, to some separate school where the standards are extremely low in many cases, where it is to babysitting. And I think part of the terror that I experienced when I was a young man, when I was 17, 18 years old, I was 17, I was a junior in high school, I had an emotional breakdown. And it was because I could look and see my skills weren't getting any better, but they kept graduating, right? They kept allowing me to go from one grade to the next. And eventually I was going to graduate. And then what? Then what would life look like for me?
Yeah.
That was terrifying, right? I didn't know about supports at a college level. I didn't know about the ADA. I didn't know any examples of people who had gone through special ed like me and have been successful. And so, it was just this sort of progression, right? That was terrifying. And so, I think we really need to look, right? Because your standard teacher is getting like 2 elective credits around what it is to support students with disabilities. It needs to be ongoing support. I'm the board chair for the New Jersey Coalition for Inclusive Education, and we do work nationally under the title All In for Inclusive Ed. And that's part of what we do, is provide those trainings. But it does, again, it takes folks looking and saying there's a better way, and not falling into patterns of prejudice where we're like saying the problem is the kid, or the problem is their household, or what have you, right? Or just falling right in very, very old, like racist ideas, and saying it's due to the color of their skin, even though that's not articulated. Our systems will reflect that. It's about, saying what are the adjustments we need to do? What are the changes we need to make sure that our schools are in service for all people?
If I can just add that it's such a big question, because there's no easy answer to it, right? In my opinion, the system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, right? And it's doing it perfectly. It's like an assembly line, right? The end product is the same. I can only see this part of what I'm doing, but when you get to the end, it's still a car, right? And so it's doing exactly what it was designed to do. When we, IQ testing was measured, right? IQ testing is based on race science, right? It was based on cognitive measures that showed that white men or white boys were the most intelligent, but we continue to rely on these. And so the only real answer, and it's, like I said, it's not an easy one, is abolishing the systems, right? So that's a tall order. That's going to happen. We can certainly continue to fight for it. But the other answer, because people always ask me like, well, what would you have done differently? If 5-10 years ago, I might have just started a school. I might have just built what wasn't there for my child and for children who look like my child. And I think historically, that's what we have done. We have built these parallel systems, even if it's, I think we were talking about this before we went live, but sending your child to school, a Black child to school who doesn't have any sort of learning differences or disabilities, they come home, you still got to do some deprogramming, right? Oh, yeah. They told you that's not right. Let me show you something else, right?
Right.
Yeah. So we've always been doing that. We need to continue to do that, because when we put our child into a building, they're going to come out and we're going to have to do some work to get it right. So, when you can build, that's what I'll say.
Yeah.
Read a couple of things. Somebody, Linda Derby, I don't know if she said she knew Marcia. Unfortunately, I feel some data may be misleading, as many of our young Black and brown people can be labeled as being disruptive rather than digging deeper and finding the root of the issue, which could be a neurodiverse issue. Also, as a mother of a neurodiverse young person, I'm fortunate to know Marcia and be informed of what to look for. There are many that are not so fortunate. So much work is needed in the UK in terms of educating more about neurodiverse and how to tackle the issue. So her point about there's a quick label, like they're just bad. They're just disruptors. They're not, it's like, does anybody want to just be bad? Like, why is somebody acting out?
Yeah.
And then
I know Linda. Yeah, I know Linda. Her daughter was being taken out of class and she didn't know why. So once we unpick that, because you've got to do a bit of unpicking before you get to knowing what the root cause is.
Right.
And that's the story of it. And so we sort of explored that and wrote some letters and got on a screening, and she was dyslexic. So yeah, but she was just being taken out of school and missing key lessons, anyway.
And but to her point about knowing like if we don't know somebody to suggest, that's another big part of it too. Fortunately, if a lot of us don't know somebody to say, hey, maybe you should look into something else, and you just accept, because there are so many people who just accept what the school says. Well, they're saying that my child, they're not just giving enough reasons. I'll just read this last one from Deandria. A possible answer to Tiffany's question: having an influence on the council members and the school board members usually impacts the policies of school districts. For most school districts, the district decides which tools are allowed for assessment and evaluation. Find out what department makes that decision in your district, and that's where the conversation needs to happen. So it's always who you know. You always got to know somebody. And then to your point, to your points about this being designed, here we are fighting this fight against this thing that like may be never ending. But I do want to probably wrap at 7:30. Yeah. And I want to end on this note of like how y'all not just survived, but thrived. Okay. Like what, I think we talked a lot about what people can look for and think about that might be signs that there's something going on. But like, once you realized that, all right, so I have this thing called dyslexia, or I have a learning difference, and now I'm going to do something else. How did you, like, what are some, I don't know if I'm asking what are some things parents can do, or teachers, or maybe even students? What are some ways that help you manage when it's not going to be in the same way that everybody else does? Like, Laderick, you mentioned audio, and go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, but I also was fed a steady diet of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King growing up as a kid, right? And so, like,
yes,
when I was going through it, when I was 17, I didn't have the language. Like, I was labeled as being neurologically impaired, right? So we talk about this mislabeling. So I didn't get a label that was associated with behavior, like so many of us do. But it was this very abstract term, which was like his brain doesn't work like everybody else's, and we don't know what to do, right? But I had a grandfather who was president of the New Brunswick chapter of the NAACP, who had a cross burn on his front yard, who knew what it was to fight. And I grew up in a household, we talked about the civil rights movement. And, I had parents who were very much informed by the Black arts movement. And, and so those were the sort of conversations and the music that was played in my house. And So when it came time for me, to go through this, I'm going through this breakdown, I'm drawing from a tradition of understanding that society doesn't always get it right, and that you can't allow the system to define who you are and what your worth is. And so and I guess, again, it's like what I tried to embody in that quote. We have this rich history, all these traditions that we can pull from. Yeah, and then one of the big pieces of it is it's a collective struggle, right? Like, we don't do this work in isolation, right? Like, we all know each other, right? There's a reason why we all know each other. We have had meetings, we have had conversations. I think it's really important that our families, when they're in community, like political involvement, join a school board. That is a tactic that I have seen many families do. If you have the means and the resource, and you're going to set up a school, right? Like, that takes generally a collective work, and that is the story of the civil rights movement. That is the story of the movement for Black liberation, decolonization, right? Like, it's people, fighting those fights together. And then just the last thing is, I'm a big supporter of mentoring. So I also think, like, I didn't have it when I was a young person, but it would have really been very valuable for me to meet, like, a college student who is accessing disabilities, who is dyslexic. It's great to hear my mama say, "Oh, you're smart and you're gonna do so well," but, like, it's my mama, like, it's her job to say that, right? So right, so it's good to hear it coming from, and there's a lot of studies around the power of near peer mentors, right? And so that's another thing I would just say. I would encourage folks to seek out those members of your community, and they may be on a college campus, right? Because it's just easier to find them. But yeah, folks who are neurodivergent, who can be a living example of what's possible.
One of the things I love about that is, when I'm just thinking about what the way my school was set up when I was in high school, and it was a different wing of the school where people who but if they did get a speaker, it was like somebody on some skill, like, here's a trade, that kind of thing. So I love that you just pointed out, like, bring in, like, a mentor or a speaker, the way I was thinking of it. That's a college student that is accessing services. Like, there are options for you other than this, like, learn this trade. Risha or Marcia, do you want to talk about ways to make it?
Yeah, sure. I want to end on looking at strengths as well. There's an author called Anthony West, and he talks about high level thinking and lower level thinking. I'm just going to make it really short, just to give some concept. But the lower level thinking for us as dyslexics is around linear and rote learning. So that's lower level thinking. But our higher level thinking, so this is to leave on a positive, is things like thinking outside the box, creative thinking, logical thinking, emotional intelligence, things we don't talk about, but they're all skills we need, whether it's in the workplace, within life in general. Logical, I'm good at spotting the difference of things, and I'm a big picture person. These things are really good things. So what we also want to do is develop our young people to know their strengths, so they can advocate, say, this is how I operate best, this is how I work best. So that's one thing I try to do with my young person, is to advocate and help her to know, what are my strengths? How can I show up and be my best within a structure that's not designed? Your brain is designed this way. This is the way your brain designed. I know I'm saying, cave time, because I don't know what part of the world I was in when I'm saying cave, because it may have not been a cave, but I'm just giving you context. I was that person what went out. I like a lot of risk, so I go out and I'm building these things. So I put a visual context to show my child or my young people that I work with that you think this way, and it was designed because that's a biodiversity of the way you are, and that's by nature. So I put a lot of that context in. But what I want to say on top of that, we have to focus on strengths. We have to focus on a strength-based approach. And I want to just leave that, because we have got so many strengths and it's not always seen in the classroom. Advocacy. I love the mentoring aspect. I do, if I can mentor a young person, I'm a careers advisor, and, I'm a trained one. So anything, I'm always helping my daughters friends because they don't have that always in their network. So
Right.
mentorings are definitely something, and role modeling. Again, I never saw any black people who were dyslexic until my 20s, and I was like, oh my gosh, and so it inspired me. So I know what that entails. So that's something that I'm really passionate. What else did I made a note? Because I have to, when I'm waiting, I have to retain information. I lose the point. So it's creating your village, I would say, and your tribe of people. So, you know, Dyslexia Alliance, any support groups that you can sort of create that village is really important. One of the things I wanted to say, and I didn't, and I know the time, but dyslexia affects language. And so even you may hear sometimes, and I'm aware of it, that sometimes what I want to say doesn't come out. And so these are some of the texts as well. But what I want to say is that we've got to hold on to our strengths, and having these kinds of conversations and dialogue, I'm hoping that we're inspiring, empowering parents to ask those questions. My mum brought her drums to school. Those are the days when you could. It's very hard to sometimes just walk into school without an appointment. Everything's very structured now. You can't get your foot in the door, I know, here. And sometimes parents are banned just for advocating for their children. So that's another story in itself. So all I would say is that I want us to be thinking positive as well and inspiring our children. I was very fortunate to learn about African history, and that did help me. It gave me hope. We've not talked about spirituality, so I'm going to leave it there. That could be another conversation, because spirituality is in there as well. And I'm leave it there because there's so much we can say, but it's a journey, and we just have to keep doing this, and this keeps changing the narrative. But I want to have a positive vibration on this as well, that there is strength there, and we want to advocate that, because our children grow up. We are Liz, Eric and I are those children what was not feeling good enough or not feeling belonged. So what do we do to help our children and empower them, because they're going to become adults, they're going to go into the workplace or be entrepreneurs? How do we show up so they feel not just belonging, but that's confidence and that self-belief and esteem in themselves? I'll stop there. Sorry.
That's no, so much of what you both said is fantastic. And I knew Risha has a child. Well, I knew about I knew you had two children. I knew one had dyslexia, but so I knew her. But you two, I've been reading so much. I've been going through your stuff and reading and looking at your Instagram pages. And I'm like, these were the children, and now they're adults. And that's why it's so important for me on this last day of Black History Month to not leave, to end the month on this, right? Like, you were the children, and now you're grown-ups, and I wanted somebody to be able to see that this is possible, right? That there is a strength and a positive side. And Risha, I'll let you say something from the strength perspective before we go.
Yeah. So you know, I can only really echo what Derek and Marcia said, because I think when we take a step back, we are building on the strengths of our ancestors, right? And so spirituality came up, Black history came up. Sundays, my dad put on the records, and we were listening to Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and some other people I'm not gonna say because I don't want to get flagged, but all of that. So I was prepared with this deep self-love, right? I grew up when you couldn't really find a whole bunch of Black dolls. My dad was at Mart 125 in Harlem looking for a Huggy Bean for me, right? Because we wanted to get the right type of Cabbage Patch looking doll, right? So a lot. So you're hearing the same things, right? Across the pond, the same things. And so we have what we need. It's all here already. We have to build that community. We have to build that village. I love that idea of the tribe, because I remember when my son found like a group of peers that were really positive and affirming for him. And I said he found his tribe, and I felt a certain sort of relief when he was in that mix. That's what we need to do, and build from what we already know, because we have been doing it as a people. There is, I think it's Wanda Blanchett, who's a professor at Rutgers, who really echoed this very well. There isn't a single sort of gain in the United States of America that has happened educationally for Black Americans that hasn't been through a fight, right? Let's look back and let's build off of what we have been doing. The strength is all here. And anyone who says anything else, deficit thinking, all of those other things, it's a lie. It's a lie to make us believe that we can't do it. And there's fear that if we know the truth, our greatness, I mean, there's no bounds.
Amen.
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 Real talk.
Right.
Thank you all. There's so much, like I'm gonna wrap too, because I highlighted parts in your book that I was like, oh, but I could have read this part about this intersection, and then parts that from summary of the parts from your book, Laderick, from some points that it adds. We're out of time, but I want you to plug these things and let people know how they can find you, what you got going on before we'll leave on that. Thank you for that amen moment, Risha. And thank you for everything that all of you, for everything that you shared today. I appreciate you. I'm glad that you were on. And I'm just grateful for this time. I'm just grateful for this day. But before we leave, I want you to share your ats, your whatever you want people to know that so they can find you. And I'll start. I'll go this way. Marcia, you go first.
So I'm just really here in the space, social media. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just really having those conversations, collaborations key. But as you guys are in America, I think really go home on to Dyslexia Alliance for Black Children. We have something called Celebrating Neurodiversity. I'm doing a few talks, and I think you can get online to those. So just follow me on LinkedIn. You'll see those. There's a whole range of them. So it's a good thing it's always really good to go on to things and learn as well that way. And of course, if you want to get the book Black, Brilliant and Dyslexic, it's really just 25 voices really talking about their lived experience as Black, neurodiverse, and it's across the pond. So you have Nigeria, you have US, you've got so many people talking about, and I just think that is so important. We need more of that, because as I said, in the academic books and our book recommendations, we don't see those books. How are we going to write about ourselves? We can't reference it in some way or form. So I'll leave it there. But yeah, you can find me on my socials. And I think we're linked to some of the stuff on our socials here as well. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Marcia. Laderick?
I would go to my website. So it's just lederick.com, LEDERICK.com. I mentioned I have a course that we're just launching for educators and family members, and there's a banner right up the top around there. The book is Empowering Students with Hidden Disabilities, A Path to Pride and Success. And I got a unique name, so if you just put that in any of the social media, it'll come up. And my Instagram's got a link tree with the links to all the different organizations that I'm connected to. I'm also a poet, and I have 2 albums of my poetry that are out.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm on iTunes and Spotify, whatever.
Cool. All right. And Risha?
Yeah, so you can find us at Dyslexia Black on social media, and then dyslexiablack.org or Dyslexia Alliance for Black Children.org to get in touch with us and learn about the different events and workshops and parent-to-parent mentoring and all the programs that we have.
Awesome. All right. Again, thank you. Thank you, Risha. Thank you, Derek. Thanks you both for giving over an hour of your time. And not that Marcia didn't as well, but I was just going to say an extra thanks because it's past midnight in the UK. So we're all grateful for that. And I'm thrilled. I'll reach out when this is ready.
You have to have a part 2. You have to have a part 2.
That's right. Well, thank you. Be looking out for that, folks. And yeah, all right, have a good rest of your evening. Thank you so much for being on Daily Border Crossings. Thank you, people, listeners who hung around for over 90 minutes. I really appreciate you. This is really good stuff, and I'm grateful. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.